In South Africa, we have a very negative perception of shale gas because it is often pitted against environmental concerns. But of course, shale gas is a big energy driver in other parts of the world. Tell us what the conference was saying about shale gas as a potential energy source.
Well, one of the things that we've been pointing out is the economic potential that the shale gas has. And as you know, there was this EIA study that was released which suggested that there could be almost 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. What some of the technical people have been doing is they've been taking a look at this particular number and making it more realistic. And I guess you have to understand that when this EIA report, that's the Energy Information Association or Administration of the United States, when they came up with this particular number and they say it's recoverable, one thing they don't say is they don't really apply a real good economic aspect. And there's a lot of other aspects. So what the experts have been doing is reducing that number down to something that's probably more realistic, and then applying some of the metrics to just see exactly how would that affect the South African economy. We're looking at some of the key issues in terms of water. We're looking at some of the other aspects. I'm talking a little bit about the geology and the geophysics. There's a number of people that have talked about how you would process the water and so forth. So I think we're getting a pretty broad brush. How do you market the gas? How do you build the pipelines and infrastructure? How it's been done in other countries like in the USA, and what are some of the economic issues and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Now let's look at the US. Of course, there shale fracking is a big issue, but it doesn't come without its problems. Environmentalists have spoken about the issues around contamination, particularly of water sources and so on. And you were speaking about how people were talking about how one deals with those challenges. In a country like South Africa, where you have a fairly good regulatory environment, but it's a young democracy where we need to balance issues. What are the kind of lessons that one should learn from the US experience and that could be used here in South Africa?
Well, first off, I think you need to make sure that you have all your regulatory laws and also your regulatory infrastructure and your people in place. And one of the things you don't want to do is to try to reinvent the wheel. You would probably, back in my old company, we used to take some of our systems and we would say, okay, we're going to take the system that we've established, say like in Malaysia, and we're going to take that system and adapt it to one of the other countries, Nigeria, or in the case of Angola or wherever. And so you build from there. There's a lot of technology and expertise that has been gained in the United States in terms of how to drill these wells, how to complete these wells, how to hydraulically fracture them, and then how to dispose of the water. And then they're developing new technologies on hydraulically fracturing. And so what you do is you take some of these same types of technologies that's been developed and developing, and some of the systems and ways to regulate, and you see what can we use here that could be applicable in South Africa and what's not usable. And South Africa has some very unique situations in the Karoo and the population, and in some cases the lack of certain levels of skill. But how do you get to the point where South Africa is its own entity, it has its own systems and processes and so forth? And then mostly, how does it economically recover the natural gas, but also protect the people, the environment, and all interested parties?
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, given the fact that there's such a lot of emphasis on regulatory environments being in place, what do you suggest is the ideal match between private and public partnerships around maximizing, shale gas? Because you obviously can't just have the private sector or just government. You would have to have a partnership, given that you would need both the financing and the regulatory environment to make a profitable venture.
Yeah, and that's always a concern. Some of the other places I've worked, and I've worked with some of the government entities in other countries, and one of the things you quickly discover is that there can be a conflict of interest in that the government is looking out and working for the interests of the country and the people, Whereas in a corporation, you're looking out for the interests of your stockholders. Now, that said, your stockholders can be members of the general public also. And so what you have to do is, as a government entity and as a private enterprise or corporation, you say, okay, wait a minute, there's got to be good common ground. We both live on this planet, we both live and work in this country or whatever, and we have to live together and work together and make sure that we have an economically and environmentally sound program to move forward. Government, how can you assist us? Regulate us, yes, but make sure that regulatory body is not punitive, except in the case of, say, like someone's negligent. But let's work this. And the other thing about regulations is you need to put in play regulations, and you may need to revise those regulations or laws or whatever as time goes and as operations goes and as need goes. The other thing is the companies have to be responsible. They have to be partly responsible for the things they do also.